Welcome to Untold Physio Stories, a podcast that informs and educates by connecting you to rehab industry leaders who share their candid successes and failures in business and practice.
Welcome back to Untold Physio Stories. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. E, with Modern Manual Therapy, The Eclectic Approach, Edge Mobility System, Untold Physio Stories podcast, of course, and UpDoc Media, among other things. My co-host, Dr. Andrew Rothschild, is not here today, but with me I have one of my mentees from my local Modern Rehab Mastery program. Actually, I shouldn't say local, it's online, but my mentee is local, and she didn't even know I was in Buffalo working just down the street from her. It's Dr. Dana Palmer, and she has a story today about how she saved an entire island population's feet from diabetes. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I thought it was an interesting story when she was telling me her background, and I really wanted to get it on Untold Physio Stories. So welcome, Dana.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then you can go ahead and tell your story.
Okay. I'm a physio that was originally trained in Canada. I graduated in 2004 and shortly after moved to a small island in the Pacific called Saipan. The island had really high rates of diabetes, about 5 times the U.S. average, and as such, they had a lot of resultant amputations from foot wounds. When being a new grad, we learned very little about wound care in school, and so I was sort of just thrown into this baptism by fire, dealing with large wounds, infected wounds, and it was quite a learning curve. The PT that I was working with, I learned a lot from her, and then I just ended up having to do a lot of online, or it wasn't even online in those days. It was like, the journal CE that you fill out and mail in to get credit for wound care. So when I first got to the island, the rates of diabetes, like I said, were 5 times that of the U.S., and then the amputation rates were crazy high. They were if the U.S. they had 2.8 amputations for 10,000 people, Saipan would have 13. It was just almost everybody was losing their foot due to wound infection. So we just started...
13% of the entire population,
no,
or 13% of diabetics?
13 people out of 10,000 were losing their limbs.
Okay.
Compared to the U.S. would be 2 or 3.
Right, that's still a lot higher percentage.
Much higher, yeah. Well, and so...
It's 13% of the population?
No. 13 people out of 10,000, yeah.
Okay.
So we just started, doing better wound care. A lot of the surgeons, the first thing they would do is just cut off the toe or cut off the leg. And so we did a lot of education with them, and we received, as you can imagine, a lot of resistance. It was a young new grad PT coming in, trying to educate surgeons on what they need to do for wound care and why they should not amputate the leg. It was an uphill battle, to say the least, but we had some really great surgeons there, great general surgeons and orthos that were receptive to that, and they saw how much effort we were putting forth, and they kind of just went with it. If we called them down to see a wound, they'd come down. It was like we had them on call. They'd come down and they'd check it out in the PT clinic. They'd write a script for culture or antibiotics if they needed to. And then basically we had free reign to make any decisions we wanted with wound care on our own. They just say, treat however you think, you should be treating. So, I mean, essentially what happened between 2004 to 2008, we reduced total amputations by more than 40%, and major limb amputations. So that's above knee and below knee. So the total, we're just talking about toes or a 4-foot, that was in the total. But below knee and above knee, we reduced by 70% in 4 years.
That's
just
a lot.
By education.
Right.
I mean, it was, and not only that, but because of the isolated, location of the islands, even if people lost a limb, they didn't have access to prosthetics. We had a prosthetic rep that would come from Hawaii every 3 to 6 months. And he would take some measurements of people, and then he would go back, and sometimes he would mail the limbs, or sometimes he'd come back however many months later, and by then maybe their health situation has changed. Some of them would have passed away by that time, or maybe something happened where they couldn't even use the limb. It wasn't the proper measurement anymore.
Right.
It just wasn't practical. So most of these people, even after their amputation, now they're wheelchair bound, and their health otherwise just further deteriorated. So, and the biggest thing we did is we developed a dedicated diabetic foot care clinic. So every Wednesdays at the PD department between 9 to 11, anyone could walk in. If they had never been in before, it didn't matter. If they didn't have a referral, it didn't matter, because we had one of our family practice docs just hang out with us in the clinic for those 2 hours, and he would just take a quick look at them, write their referral, then they'd come on and see PT for their wound dressings or a foot inspection. We had a diabetes nurse educator that would sit and talk to them about controlling their diabetes, lifestyle issues. We had a dietitian that would come in and talk about nutrition and like what they should be eating and not eating. It was just this multifactorial approach that, and then people became like, we were their comfort place. Like, hey, you go into the diabetic clinic next Wednesday, I'll see you there, you know? Yeah. And it was just this community, and that's what made the big difference. Is bottom line, what we did is we cared. And it's not that the other practitioners didn't care, but they didn't necessarily care to learn more or try harder. It was just, we're just going to do what's always been done. We're going to do wet to dry dressings until the end of time, until it's time to remove the leg.
That's pretty much all I learned in school.
Right?
I mean,
yeah.
And I never even did it. It's like you had to have been at a clinic that did it, and all I did was ortho.
Right.
You know, and a couple of acute cares. And even though I worked at a VA, I pretty much they already all fitted, you know, and I may have applied prostheses.
Right.
That were already fitted. I never did anything beyond that, and some of them had minor wounds, but I feel like I didn't even address that as a student, because I was pretty much just dressing them and doing gait training.
Right.
So yeah, that's amazing. I mean, a tagline could be like, walk in and you still walk out.
Right. You know? That's a great one. We called it the limb preservation plan.
Right. And that's great. It's a great name.
You know, it's and then I ended up presenting at the CDC conference in 2010 for the Division of Diabetes Translation, I think it is, the DDT. Anyway, I presented our findings at that conference because I traveled around to the other islands and delivered these courses to healthcare providers, and they have nurses and docs and PTs and techs, and just kind of teaching them like, hey, this is how you can set up a clinic in your community, you know, and we developed a curriculum, and the idea was to kind of continue, but then once I moved to the mainland, I didn't have the proximity anymore where I could just easily island hop. It was a bigger, you know, thing to get out there, and then they have a lot of issues with funding where they just can't get the funding together necessarily to bring someone out. It was right. Pretty hard when I would bring people out for conferences to like raise the money and then, you know, get all that together. So it kind of fell by the wayside after that, but that was the success story.
That's an awesome success story. I mean, You don't hear too much about a PT or physio literally changing the lives of so many people over the course of a short period of time.
Right.
And I think it's one of those things that we look for in entrepreneurialism, where you really need to find a need,
right,
and a niche. And I'm currently trying to push Dana to release some sort of product for physios in developing countries, or not even physios, but just wound care clinics, because she is a wound care instructor at a transitional DPT program too. So she is now my new resident expert of a thing that I didn't even know, a need that I didn't even know needed to be filled.
Yeah, so this is so I have a curriculum that I developed, and due to your urging, I am going to put it together in digital form and have, you know, that available to, you know, wound care, because you can learn about wound care in the traditional way, like I teach it with ATSU. But when you're living in these places, you don't have access to all these fancy technology and tools, and, you know, even some of the best evidence-based stuff. You just can't get that there.
Right.
It's not going to happen. So you need a more practical approach, and that's sort of what this program was, even from the beginning. And then just how to set up a clinic. Like, where do I start? I want to set up a clinic to address these, you know, diabetic foot care needs. What are the steps I need to take to do that? So I'm in the process.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks to Dr. E for urging me.
Look for the eclectic approach to wound care coming soon. I don't know if she's got a co-brand, but that would be awesome. But yeah, it just goes to show that, again, the best programs are educational based, and you don't need a lot of fancy schmancy things or technology or even implements to make significant differences in people's lives and outcomes. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Dana, and thanks
welcome.
Of course for being a mentee in Modern Rehab Mastery. So Anyway, all right. Well, you can find me, Dr. E, at Modern Rehab Mastery. That's our new online mentoring program. It includes modern manual therapy, modern patient education, and modern strength training. It's 3 months with 3 mentors. So 1 month with each mentor, 4 weeks, tons of modules, lots of CEUs, learn at your own pace for a month, then move on. So go beyond the seminar. You also get chat room with your mentees and mentors and live Q&As every week. Check out all my products, Edge Mobility System. We have the new Edge ISTM toolbox that includes the Edge Mobility Star and the OG Edge Mobility tool, our Edge Restriction System BFR cuffs. That's part of Dr. Kyle Coffey's Modern Strength Training BFR certificate. I hope to see you at a live eclectic approach course soon. That's modern manual therapy in US, Canada, and South America. And make sure to rate Untold Physio Stories 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. You could also subscribe on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. And as always, you guys have an awesome day.